Marvel, DC.
You know it's been. It's gonna. You know it was gonna be coming. At some point, you gotta talk about it.
Yeah. Some point, yeah. It's too in the mainstream. They're too everywhere. It's ridiculous. Welcome back to the Gentleman's Sit Down. We are an untraditional podcast.
Trying to be traditional gentlemen.
I am Sirius D. Lemitius.
I'm Joshua Callahan.
Links in the description below for the social medias. There's a like, a subscribe, there's a ding, there's a comment section, there's a share button. These are options for you.
Interact.
Yeah, if you want to interact.
Or react.
Yeah, if not.
Just act.
Yeah, if you don't want to, whatever, It's up to you, Individual choice, right? Go fuck yourself. Anyway,
Action. Or inaction.
Yeah. Marvel, DC. Well, it's really MCU versus DCU. Now, I have an opinion on the DCU. I don't really know. It doesn't seem to exist. It's kind of like it's there, but it's not there. It's kind of within blurred lines. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you mean. It's kind of because it fell apart. They didn't do it right, or you can argue like they did it wrong, or they just left up to Zack Snyder or whatever. You can argue, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen. What they did is not going to go forward. They're still going to finish some things, and they're having problems with stuff that they're going to finish, and they're trying to make it connected. That's the whole point. Trying to make it a connected universe with their movies and properties. But Marvel has some struggling. I mean, not Marvel. DC has some struggling creators there.
Yeah,
Marvel has the opposite.
You know what I think? Maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's they tried to go too business with it. You know what I mean? They cared more about sales than they cared about the actual structure of the story and connecting the stories.
Get out! Really? Yeah. People do that. Businesses still do that.
Yeah,
of course.
Because here's this thing about these business people. They don't realize that if they did it right, they let the creators do their thing, they would have made a shit ton of wad of cash. But instead,
like Marvel did.
Yeah. Instead, they wanted to be all businessy about it. And guess what they did? They shot themselves in the foot. Because that's what they always do when corporations and businesses get involved with artistic properties.
This is what I don't understand. Here we are talking about something, and we're talking about the success of one over the other and how the failures may be based on business. True, right? But it happens in film all the time. It's like, everything is kind of based on an existing property to a certain extent. Very rarely do you get, this is an original movie meant to be a movie. It's a movie for a movie in cinema, boom, right? But most of it comes from another property. The stuff that is really good is when you take care of the original properties and you say, why does that book have to be reimagined for the cinema, for the screen? Is it the character? Is it because of the situations that happen, the content or whatever? I would argue for Marvel, that's what they did. They stayed true to, okay, why are we recreating it? Just to sell toys or do things? We know that could possibly, most likely be a byproduct. But we're doing it because the characters, for whatever reason, have stood the test of time. People love them. So if we do something that they love and reimagine them for the screen, we can use wizardry and, casting, magic, as well as script, and get some artistic directors and have a take on it. And then people will come to see it. And they did. Why wouldn't you want to take care of the original property if you're going to reimagine it for a screen or TV or even radio for that matter?
I think they tried in DC. I don't know what. I'm gonna be honest. I don't really know why it crumbled for DC. I mean,
I'll tell you why.
You could theorize. There's definitely some clear signs.
You saying it's because of the suits?
I think the suits.
The business.
I think the suits. I don't know. I wasn't there, so what the fuck do I know? But I think the suits might have...
That's your hypothesis.
Yeah, I feel like the suits maybe got a little too involved with the creative process, and they probably should have just left it to the professionals. You know what I'm saying?
the professional creators.
Exactly. The people who, know how to make creative stuff. But to also play devil's advocate to the creators, I know that creators and creative people can go a little too far with their creations, and and then they're not really thinking too well on the business end of the spectrum.
I think the business model, like coming from like Marvel, for instance, was like, it was a risk. So because they chose characters that weren't necessarily the ones like everybody thinks of, maybe Spider-Man, Batman, the Superman one. DC arguably has the most memorable, been around longer, but they stood more of the test of time and even had movies made of them. So why did Marvel? Because they knew if they didn't have a character that wasn't as famous or renowned, they would have to be more focused on the story, the character. Who are we going to cast? Who's a, Oscar award-winning actor and give it gravitas, maybe, or just a sense of reality instead of like a cartooniness to it, And then we'll film that, before we even get to the actual creating the film, we'll film somebody interesting in a less renowned role, but interesting on paper, and really heighten up the character, the story, and then see what we got. And look and then they interact with each other. They're from a larger universe. I mean, it's the first done successfully in the way it's done, like the Marvel, but it's not the first ever. There's been interconnected universes before, Star Wars, is an easy one to think of, but then you have the monster universe where they would interact. I mean, every movie, what?
It was a little looser.
Yeah, a little looser. Like, not even, this was going into a movie with the hope of a greater tapestry.
Yeah.
They knew that they were going to do it if things went well successfully.
Yeah. Well, they had hopes for it. Yeah. They had hopes for it, and they had the beginnings, the groundwork for ideas for it, But that's, I don't know. Marvel definitely bought the better end of the pizza.
They stayed true to what they did in the comic books. They already had a model prepared for them, and the way they storyboard and the way they connect the universe. Because you go. I loved reading comics, mostly read Marvel. I enjoyed that interactive universe. I didn't always read Captain America, but when he would pop up, I'd be like, this is cool.
Hey, how you doing?
How you doing? Nice to meet you. What do you do? Oh, you flip around with the shield? Oh, great. You have a star on your chest. Go for it.
Yeah.
And then, whatever. But I didn't... DC with the books and the comic books seemed a little bit cartoony to me, even back like when I was reading in the 80s. And the 90s. They would have their serious moments, but arguably they all came from a little cheeky, kind of history of kind of being written for kids. But Marvel did challenge themselves to do more realistic kind of starts. Like they would take, okay, now you're a family that has superpowers, Fantastic Four, go. You're battling your alternate personality, okay, Hulk, go, and they have like these superpowered things. Whereas
DC was always a little more mature.
I'm arguing the opposite, but what do you mean?
Like they always, they're maybe not mature, but they always touched on darker.
I think there was a time in the 70s, themes. You're definitely right, where they would toy around before Marvel did with a lot of darker properties. But what I was kind of to say is like, you have Flash that goes really fast, and then you had Superman's from an alien, then you had Wonder Woman is from this like Amazonian, and they wrote it with a sense of sci-fi for kids, but both of them wrote for kids at the beginning. Yeah. But what I was arguing was that like Marvel would try to put a real world relatability context to it. Like a family. Even the X-Men is based on marginalized people. That happens as kind of like a civil rights kind of reaction. Maybe the Hulk is kind of like analyzing a psychological thing and then imbuing one part of that psychosis with superhuman strength and powers. Like, okay, go. I don't know. But anyways, the movies. been fun to watch and enjoy because of its connectivity.
Yeah. Even I saw the new Black Panther. It's not bad. I love,
Did you see the first one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the first one was better, but
Yeah.
this one was still, it was good. It was a proper sequel, especially given the circumstances they had.
The Marvel build up to this culmination with the end game and everything of
And
all its connected movies.
You know why
This
else
is
I like
What?
Black Panther? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you know why else? What else I like about Black Panther is it seems like Black Panther seems to be the first Marvel movie that I've seen in like 3-4 years that actually is not the same cut and paste kind of formula that they've been doing the last 3-4 years. All the Marvel movies seem to be, after Guardians of the Galaxy came out, all the Marvel movies started to hit that kind of formula. Not exactly Guardians of the Galaxy, but like that kind of like humorous, action packed, formula. This movie kind of did its own thing. Like it still had like the elements of the Marvel formula that's been going on, but it did its own thing too. It took itself a little more seriously. Well, it took itself a lot more seriously.
You can't disagree with that. I don't think anybody can disagree with that because
Mhm.
it was pretty much a send off for someone. It was kind of meta in that it was celebrating the life of a real human being
Mhm.
who imbued a character with life, a fictional character with life, and then the two became synonymous.
Yep.
And only very few pictures, like one standalone, and the rest were like him interacting with other people in other movies. So if you didn't have the interconnectivity of the Marvel universe, you may not have. I mean, first Black Panther was phenomenal, but you can't deny his interaction with in the Civil War movie and the other movies that he was a part of. He was integral to the plot
Left
of
an
those
impact.
movies and left impact because he was integral to the plot of those movies moving forward narratively.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you give him his soul. It was a way to build up a character, like introduce a character. I'm like, oh my God, who is he? And then you go to his world or his part of the world, and then you see like, oh my God. So how specific that can be. What I was going to say, it build up to a culmination in the end game, which is undeniably one of a kind, unique. Not that it's a blast of all these characters in one movie. We've seen big, movies with a lot of people, like a huge cast of people, famous or otherwise. But heroes and people that have held their own movies and interacted in other movies and on television shows in a big movie and to affect the plot and narrative. Like, it was brilliantly fun, done well, and really honest to the characters. And then it has this is the problem I'm going to say Marvel may run into. I think it's artistically a good problem to have, but not everybody's going to love it. And is that the overall narrative in the universe is going to have peaks and valleys. That's what the comic books do. Like, this is a sad time because they're dealing with some big event. So naturally, a lot of people are saying, well, these movies are kind of like downtrodden. It's talking about death and grief because of what happened after Endgame. And so they're not as fun. A little bit more serious take. Like, you'd think Eternals, you think
Eternals. All right.
Black Widow and them. I'm just saying that they took a totally different twist. They weren't trying to be the fun-loving Ragnarok
They were
or
more
Guardians
serious.
like you were talking about.
They were
Yeah.
more serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a serious take on something.
I
Still
think-
trying to have fun with it.
Yeah, I still
Like, how
think
do you have fun?
Eternals, like Eternals in particular, I still think was in that formula of like comedy, like Doctor Strange, the new Doctor Strange movie, to me, vastly different from the first Doctor Strange movie. It didn't feel, maybe I'm wrong, but it didn't feel like a Doctor Strange movie. It felt like just a Marvel splash movie, but Doctor Strange is the main character, That's what it felt like.
I see what you're saying about the formula.
Yeah.
Like, they're trying to make it more, but I think,
Streamlined a little bit.
yeah,
A little bit.
they're not trying to go too weird, but then I don't know. Like, then I see I respect what they're going for. Like, in other words, you have Sam Raimi dealing with the supernatural and the magic. They're really leaning into it. Now, maybe the actual events are more formulaic. Like, okay, it's a chase movie. Who will get to the person first, the MacGuffin, which in this case was a person. Would it be the bad guys or the good guys? It's that kind of thing. But then, the way they introduced stuff, the way they talked about, like, a person who was a hero who helped them save the day in the previous movies becomes the bad guy in another movie because she's trying to get her kids that were killed. Like if you say that out loud, you're like, wait, what movie are we talking about? Sounds Shakespearean. What is she, like, Medea?
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? So I thought it's an interesting, wow, they're going there. And then she became the villain of the movie. And then they didn't excuse it away as like a multiversal kind of thing. Although the multiversal side does exist, it's like the person that we knew becomes bad. Her journey made her become a villain. Her like arc in the movies and the shows. I just think that's fascinating. Did they do you can debate if they did it well or not, or however. But
here's the thing. I'm gonna give a perspective, and I don't know if you'll agree with it. I think you will, at least to an extent. You'll definitely agree with the DC part of it. I don't know if you'll agree to the Marvel part exactly. I think you'll agree a little bit. But I think the two trilogies that really changed superhero movies forever and pretty much laid the foundations of the vibe that you're going to get from each cinematic universe. You have obviously the Dark Knight trilogy, and for DC, pretty much laid the foundation work of what the DC universe is now. That darker, grittier, realistic kind of universe. That's all thanks to Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale, and Heath Ledger, and all these great guys, all the great actors and creators that were in that trilogy. They pretty much created what the DC universe is now. And for Marvel, a lot of people think it's Iron Man, but I think it goes back even farther. I think Sam Raimi's trilogy, Spider-Man trilogy, is the real foundation stone of what ended up becoming Marvel's vibe and style of their cinematic universe. Because Spider-Man is pretty much that character anyway. He's that fun-loving, beat the bad guy kind of character. And Spider-Man 2 is like, Spider-Man 2 before The Dark Knight came out was like the best superhero film ever made. Then The Dark Knight came out and it's like, whoa, like that's, like even today, it's one of the hardest films to ever beat, ever. And The Dark Knight film was the first superhero film that won Oscars. So it's like, it's really hard to beat that film, But Iron Man, just to go off on it, to continue, Iron Man pretty much took that vibe, the Spider-Man trilogy, but it did it its own way, and it took that foundation, right? And it did it its own way, and it took a character that was unique and not well known. Like, I didn't know who the fuck Iron Man was until that movie came out.
I did because I read the comics, but he was never even then like
Yeah, people keep telling me that too. Like comic book fans who read the comics are like, Iron Man was like not even, he wasn't like one of the big cast guys. Like he was, but he wasn't anyone's favorite.
The popular comic books that were out were like, X-Men, Spider-Man, so on. So the ones that people recognize, right?
Yeah, everybody kept telling me like everyone's favorites usually were Spider-Man, obviously, and then Captain America was in there. Thor was kind of in there, but like Hulk was definitely one of the big ones, and obviously the X-Men, like Wolverine.
I want to speak to your opinion. So finish what you were.
So what I'm saying, I want
to be able to react.
So
to
Iron
that.
Man kind of began this. What we have the Marvel Cinematic Universe is now, and he laid down like he's the birth of the new generation, right? And every Marvel movie that came out after that is based off his example, right? That film example, and that's kind of go off of I guess how the MCU built itself. The DCU is starting to do that. I don't know if they realize it yet, but I think the DCU is starting to do that because the Batman that just came out is pretty much what you were talking about in the beginning. It's really loyal to the comics while also doing its own thing, while also keeping it grounded in realism and keeping that grittiness that the Dark Knight trilogy began.
So, here's what I think. I agree in terms of broad strokes. Like in other words, when they come to the table and they think about, okay, we're going to do this. What is it going to look like, feel like? Boom. I think you're right. I think Dark Knight, Zack Snyder, and them was like, okay, we're going to I'm going to saturate it with these different kind of colors or whatever, but I'm going to keep it steeped in this dark reality, this kind of darkness. Like I'm really going to press up the, his mom died thing of Superman and Batman. I'm going to really, and that's how they connect. And the darkness of, Wonder Woman during World Wars, how she, you know what I'm saying? So it comes from this, let's take what Nolan had and go with that palette and that kind of thematic take, right? And then you could arguably be right. I never heard that before about the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies being like thematic and tone or vibe for Marvel going forward. What is it going to feel like? What is it going to look like? Well, how about those Spider-Man movies? I mean, it is a Marvel property, even though it was owned by a different company, blah, 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 blah. Like, but I think once it took off, it became its own thing. They fell away from the broad strokes and went more into finer strokes. Like some of the movies became genre movies with superheroes. So you couldn't say it was a superhero movie. Clearly it was, but then you argue something like Winter Soldier became more of an espionage spy thriller movie that was in it an action with fun and some comedy,
and
right?
Adventure, yeah.
And then Ragnarok was like, okay, we're not doing the Shakespearean Game of Thronesy Thor thing. We're going to have fun with this character. And it became more of a Guardians of the Galaxy kind of feel. Yeah. So you're right on a lot of different levels there. I think though the broad strokes, that's where they started. But I think Marvel was able to go away and kind of do more and get more risky. And that's why they went to Afrofuturism with
they got experimental for a little while.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like to
Black
me.
Panther,
Yeah. What it seems like to me is they got experimental for a little while.
Because real quick, I just want to say Black Panther came after Guardians. So it wasn't, that was totally off. And Captain Marvel was a buddy movie that went back to the 90s. It was kind of like a flashback. So these movies, I know what you're saying, like fell on to I think Ragnarok did, but I think it was because it was successful as a space comedy kind of thing, which Guardians was. Because of the directors, James Gunn and Taika Waititi,
Yeah, but the thing is, I think Marvel got a little experimental, and then they stuck to they found a formula that sold, and they stuck to it. Like Thor was interesting to me. Thor was my favorite Marvel character.
The first one, or like when Taika took it
when
over?
When it was new, like when the Marvel Cinematic Universe was new, Leo, and like. Thor was released, like the first Thor, and I really liked the second Thor. I liked that because it was different from all the other Marvels. Yeah, and Anthony Hopkins was amazing. And Anthony Hopkins is one of my heroes, by the way. But
superhero? Yes.
Yeah. And I just liked that it was like tonally different, like, oh yeah, this is what Thor brings to the table. He brings this antique, archaic presence that should make him, in my opinion, he's the oldest of all the fucking Marvel people. He should be the wisest for that too, then. You know what I'm saying? And like that's sort of the direction that he was initially going, it seemed like. But then Ragnarok happened and he became, not that he's not wise, but he kind of became like a joke. Like Thor is like one of the joke characters. He became more of a
playboy. He was more of the, if Bruce Wayne had full life and he was going to be a playboy, this alter ego, but that was his real ego. And then Thor as a protector becomes his alter ego, becomes the superhero because now he's a protector. I don't know. That's my take on it. I did collect Thor for a while because at first like this whole Norse thing, this is what I didn't like about it. Let's go to mythology. I'm like, that's not going to be fun or interesting. And then I read the Walt Simonson run. And I thought it was drawn nicely, but then the stories had real cosmic effect. They had stakes, high stakes. Yeah. I think that's what you liked about Thor 2 was like the stakes that they had affected like large groups of people, not just, is he going to save the child from the thing that's falling down on him?
Yeah.
Or getting the cat out of the tree?
Yeah. I don't know. He had a larger impact. I don't know. That's what I feel. And DC, I really think DC is gonna have I think they're rebirthing their cinematic universe.
I think it
and
can have a
think
renaissance.
Oh yeah, I think they're rebirthing their cinematic universe. That's why they're closing up the old one, and they're starting the new one with the Batman. Okay, because they're already talking about Penguin having his own series. You know, I don't know if that's gonna happen still, but they're talking about it.
I think it needs to be inspired for them to do shoot-offs. I think some of the stuff that you've seen in Disney Plus is inspired, and they're digging deep into a trove of new characters instead of like, oh, this was successful. What can we spin off of it? It was just like an old way of looking.
I agree. That's why I didn't. I agree.
Inspired.
I wasn't happy about hearing about a Penguin series. I'd rather just see the Penguin in the Batman films, you know, and then have it grow from there. Let him be like the main villain in the second one or third one, whatever. Maybe he's one of those villains that builds up in the background for a later film. You know, I don't know. But I think it's going to begin. You also have Catwoman in the Batman. So it's already, and she's talking about going to Bloodhaven. So you're already beginning this cinematic universe within the crevices of the Batman. Yeah. And I think they know that. I think that's their goal. They just didn't want to say it because just in case it doesn't work out again, at least it stands alone as its own thing too.
Listen, I think that both, like, I know Marvel's like, if you want to put like is winning the game, if there's a game, I want them all to win. I want it all to be good stories, the great characters, and especially Batman and others. Like, I can't wait to see what they do with Flashpoint and other things. Like, I'm excited. And Aquaman, I didn't think I was going to like that character, but I like the movie. You know, like, I want it all to be winning. I want it all to be good. But I don't, if you get an oversaturated of a lot of superheroes, then it can, they compete and then it can crumble. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're establishing
I think if they do the same thing that Marvel did in its early stages, bring in the characters on their own, standalone films, introduce them, have them build towards, and then have like something lingering in the background of every single film, but it's the same thing. Like Thanos was lingering in the background of every single film at some point.
Kang is doing that now in this current thing.
Yeah.
Like, and we're going to find out more about that. It's fun.
Yeah. And that's ultimately brings them to a big, culmination film where it's like, hey, we're together. We've all been seeing things go down bad. Hey, let's team up, kill it. Boom.
Climax.
Yeah. I think we covered it, right?
Hey, it's ongoing. We've never really covered, but we cover for the most part. You know how you feel, know how I feel. I love it.
Yeah, I'm more of a DC fan, but that's because I'm a Batman fan.
Always and forever a Marvel fan, but I love characters and stories. Yeah, so Batman, go for it. I love you.
I like Marvel too. I like certain Marvel films. There's certain films I'm not. I saw the new Doctor Strange film. I saw the new Black Panther film. I prefer the Black Panther film. I think it's great, and I think she's gonna be a great Black Panther. But anyway, I really do think they did a great job with that film.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I think there's certain things like Ironheart. I felt like, she was cool, but I was like, why
now?
Why now? Yeah, exactly. Why now? Why is she here now? Bring her to the next movie or something else.
Wedged in.
Yeah.
Wedged.
She felt a little wedged in. She was cool, but come on. The movie's about Miss Black Panther. All right. Now, I don't care about. I don't care about Ironheart. Get the fuck out of here. I want Black Panther. I want to talk about her. Thank you.
Anyway.
Yeah. She was like kind of annoying because she was like, oh, I figured it out before you did. It's like, oh my God. Well, can the Black Panther please figure it out? I want her to figure it out.
Black Panther figure it out.
Yeah.
She's a Black Panther.
Yeah. She's a Panther. Anyway. I think we covered it.
Yeah. That's good.
I've been Soterius De Lamitzius.
I've been Joshua Callahan.
We've been the Gentleman Sit Down. If you love films, you love Marvel, DC, all that, so leave a comment.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed the video, if you enjoyed the video, share it, subscribe, ding a bell, something like that, Do that stuff. We'll catch you next week. We hope you have a great week.
Yeah, man.
Peace.
Peace and love.